guest with us. You can find him on Instagram, Orange Crush News 365. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
So let's get a little background. So kind of just give everybody an idea of what you bring to the table when you cover the Broncos.
So a little bit about my pages. I like to think of myself as a little amateur sports writer. I get on, I kind of watch all the highlights of the Broncos games, practices during the training camps, see what players are standing out, how the position battles are going. I'll give my opinions, give an update, kind of give breakdowns of the games pre and post game. And then I just upload it. And sometimes I'll have discussions with a couple of my followers. A lot of them like to ask me what I think of Bo Nix, the coaching status, like is Sean Payton in the hot seat, so on and so forth. Some of the questions I get asked. So
Instagram for quite a while. I've been following your stuff, kind of reacting, and we had a little conversation, and obviously some news broke today that you and I just talked about the other night about Justin Simmons signing with the Atlanta Falcons. We had just talked last night on our podcast about, obviously he was the best available player out there. And you and I, Matt, we were talking, is it Justin Simmons being picky? Was it teams maybe not willing to give him, the money? But a 1 year, $8 million, 7.5 guaranteed, that's pretty dang good for a 1 year deal.
Yeah, no, I'm actually very surprised it took him this long. And like I said, with Caden Stearns going before Justin Simmons, and no problems with Caden Stearns at all. I think he's a great player, but between the two, if I had to pick the two of them, Justin Simmons would always win that battle. I'm very happy that he finally got signed with the team. And now the Falcons defense, if you just saw the news, Judon just signed with the Falcons. So, they're about to have a pretty good secondary and a good defensive line as well.
Him and Bates. That defense, obviously the Judon pick was huge. They haven't had a double-digit sack guy in like 4 or 5 years is what I was reading on that, which makes the Michael Penix pick even more wild when there was pass rushers there. But maybe they knew going into the draft that, hey, we had a chance to get Judon, so let's take the quarterback and worry about the veteran with that. So you had mentioned Caden Stearns. That one kind of caught me off guard. I actually thought he may have had a chance. I know the safety spot with P.J. Locke, and then the signing of Brandon Jones. And, did it come off as a surprise that maybe Caden Stearns was let go, barring, how cheap he, it didn't really hurt anything with the cap?
Yeah, I was actually very caught off guard with it because I thought, with his injury happening in week 1 of last season, and that type of injury, like you can come back from it within 6 months to a year with physical therapy. So I was very caught off guard with it. I wasn't expecting that at all. I don't know, maybe they were just concerned with his longevity. But then you look at Timothy Patrick, who hasn't played a game in 2 years. So, and then I was like, well, why not cut Patrick instead of Stearns? Because I think the safety position was a spot that Denver really, really struggled in. And near the end of the season, they only had 3 safeties on their active roster after DeLorean Turner-Yell was injured. They only had P.J. Locke, Justin Simmons, and J.L. Skinner, who's been standing out in training camp as well. But, at one point, they only had 3 safeties. So I was very, very surprised that they would let any safety go at that point.
That obviously probably played a factor into it. I know Sean Payton spoke highly of him last year when they drafted him. But I think that's one of the areas where I'm really concerned about going into the season is our secondary. You have PS2 at corner 1, obviously. Mathis was kind of suspect last year. You had Fabian Moreau, who I didn't think was very good. I think it was just Mathis wasn't playing good enough to where Fabian Moreau kind of looked good. McMillian is obviously a slot. I don't think they want to put him outside. That also leaves Riley Moss. Give us your thoughts on Riley Moss possibly being cornerback 2.
From what I'm hearing about him is that he has really good instincts when he's lined up on the outside. When he plays the receiver, he kind of anticipates the route. He anticipates the receiver's route so that he can play the ball a little bit better. He's got long arms. So from what Sean Payton said about him, I believe it was yesterday, it was like if the receiver catches the ball, he really had to fight for it because Riley Moss is a fighter. He will get his hands in there. He is not going to like he will wrestle you to the ground for that ball. So I mean, if you caught it, you earned it, and that's the type of physicality you want in that secondary. So I really do think he has a good shot at it. But nipping at his heels, is the rookie Chris Abrams-Drain is on his heels, and then with Levi Wallace. But my concern with Levi Wallace is, he sat out the last couple of days with that hamstring. But I think Riley Moss really has a good shot at lining up as cornerback number 2 alongside Pat Surtain.
So that's a good sign, obviously, with it being preseason. But, I mean, reps are reps. So, I mean, that's experience he's getting in an NFL game. So with that, I mean, you look at this roster, and I know a lot of people are kind of writing Denver off already. I saw another thing. It was 3-14. It was a race for a number 1 overall pick. But honestly, when you look at this roster, it may not be deep, but there's some good players on this roster. I mean, you think about Malcolm Roach on the D-line, with Allen, Baron Browning, Nick Benito. Jonah Ellis is going to, I think, be a real huge factor in for the defense this year. So what's your overall thoughts on where this roster is?
So my overall thoughts is, I think going into that draft, going into training camp, they wanted to go with the younger, talented group, so Jonah Ellis, who has been a monster off the edge since the start of, the training camp. And then you have the young secondary, which is why I think that was the ultimate reason Caden Stearns was let go, so that J.L. Skinner, who's younger, can come in and have his spot. You have that young line, but you also have the veterans on the front seven as well. Zach Allen, who did a pretty good job last season near the end. And then now you have Jonathan Franklin Myers, who was brought in during the NFL draft from the Jets. And him and Malcolm Roach, from what I'm reading, is they've really been the glue of that line. Like, the team just rallies around those two. And that's good. You want those younger guys to rally around those vets like that, because when you rally around, you have 1 or 2 people that you can rally around, you tend to play a little bit better. You play smarter. You get that mentorship, that guidance, and that's what you need. And that's what I think for a long time this team was lacking. Not that anyone hadn't stepped up as a mentor, like, Justin Simmons was a great mentor. His leadership on and off the field was great. But with all the turmoil with, like, the Russell Wilson drama between the last 2 years, that locker room was divided. But you look at it now, and this team is just more united, and you get that sense. You see the morale is uplifted, like, with the new uniforms and the new teammates, the younger team, like this team, like that losing mentality is gone, and it shows. It clearly shows. And for everyone that was saying 3-14, number 1 pick, last in the division, I'm keeping the receipts. So, yeah, I'm excited. I have high hopes for this team. I'm actually really excited for this team.
Show here in the next few weeks as preseason wraps up. I still think it's probably like a 7 or 8 win. I think the ceiling with maybe 10 at most, but that's even pushing it still. I mean, you're still up in the air about what Bo Nix is really going to be once you get into actual real regular season. It changes a little bit, speeds and hopefully the decision making and the offense still is clicking with like they were week 1 of the preseason. Last position spot on the defense that I kind of want to touch on. You lose to Josie Jewell. You bring in Cody Barton. Jonah Griffin is there. These linebackers you lose Drew Sanders. That was a huge one. That's one I had high hopes on. But these linebackers are kind of suspect. Alex Singleton's great. He's a good tackler. But as far as coverage wise, they're definitely thin, and I think one of our weaker spots.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the linebacker position is something Denver's really struggled with the last, 6 to 7 seasons. And mostly it's covering tight end. Tight ends are Denver's Achilles heel. They do not have anyone that can cover a tight end, and having to play Travis Kelce twice a year, it sucks and it's frustrating that we know Pat Mahomes, like when he gets flushed out of the pocket, his first and last look is going to be Travis Kelce. And that's because Kelce is so good at running with Mahomes, finding that open space, and then he just sits there and he waits for Pat to look up and see him. And it's so frustrating because, like, if I can see it, why can't they? But yeah, the linebacker position is definitely something that Denver's really struggled in. But the battle between Cody Barton and Jonah Griffith is still neck and neck. which I'm surprised because Jonas Griffith is coming off of that ACL tear, the season
Mm-hmm.
ending. So, but to see him perform the way he is, he's had a few passes battled down, some sacks, blown up a few run plays. So, he's coming back and he's just ready to play. And then you have another unsung hero, Thomas Nkoum,
Yep.
he's come out of nowhere and he's had quite a big impact in that linebacker position as well. So I think with the right pieces there, again, with that mentorship, you have some veterans, some younger players with the right pieces there. I'm confident there'll be a slight improvement there. I think Thomas Nkoum is really good at coverage, but again, like Denver's tight end, I don't know if we'll talk about it later. Denver's tight end position is kind of a area I'm concerned about. So I want to see how they would match up against these teams that actually have legit tight ends. Like the Chiefs with Travis Kelce. So that'll be a true test right there.
And I get it, one preseason game, but at the same time, everything that I've been seeing is the vibe out at training camps like complete opposite of last year. Guys are flying around. I heard today that Sean Payton made the second team or third team offensive line stop in the middle of practice and get in a huddle again because they weren't getting out quick enough. And Zach Wilson was actually mad because he couldn't get the play in quick enough. So, the things that shot Denver in the foot last year were play calls, not being able to break a huddle. This even goes back to when we had Nathaniel Hackett for that one long year. Yeah. So things are changing. I think the first position group that we can dive into first, which is the running backs, you go into the season and everyone's questioning Javonte. Javonte looks really good. Now we have the two young guys, Jaleel McLaughlin and is it Watson? And then you have Samaje Perine. I think Perine may actually be the odd man out right now.
I would agree with that, yeah. And it's a young running back core. Javonte Williams, who was very inconsistent last year, he averaged 3.6 yards a carry, which is a career low for him. And I think a lot of that, he was just really worried about that ACL, which I totally understand. It's always hard to come back from injury. You're always worried, like it's in the back of your head, like when if I re-tear it. So I think he was kind of afraid he was going to do it again. There was no power. There was no explosion out of the line. This year, it's like a complete 180. It's a different Javonte Williams. He's lost weight. He looks trimmer. He's faster. And then even Jaleel McLaughlin, I was with you as well. I thought like Jaleel McLaughlin may take RB1, Williams RB2, but I mean I think Williams is going to stay at 1, McLaughlin at 2, and then Audric Estime is going to. Yep, Audric Estime is going to take over for Samaje Perine, and that guy is just a tank, man. Like if you got him one-on-one in open field, there was a clip. It was against safety Omar Franklin, I believe it was, one of Denver's new additions, and Estime broke through the line, and it was between him and Omar, and he just hit the truck stick, man. So I think that guy is going to be good at goal-to-goal situations, which is an area Denver struggled in, which is good. And then you also have Tyler Beatty, Blake Watson. Both of them are pretty speedy guys, good receiving backs as well. And then with Estime, going back to him again, he's also a pretty good blocking back, which should give Bo Nix or whoever's starting that confidence. Like I have all the protection I need right here.
It was the fact of fumbling the ball at the 1 yard line, or just terrible reads essentially in the red zone. So I think Estime, obviously with the fumble, he'll figure that out. I have no doubt in my mind that he'll figure that part out. That's going to be a bruiser that they need, and one that takes a little bit of pressure off of whoever the quarterback's going to be in the red zone, that they don't have to make that perfect throw or the perfect read. Our offensive line is going to be more than capable of blocking the run, and these guys, I think, got a bad rap last year with the sacks. That not all of them were their fault. I mean, they did. They got burned on a few of those. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But a good chunk of those. I think we're going to get into more of what their strengths are. Quick release, run game. Ben Powers, Quinn Miners, and whoever ends up being the center. I think McGlinchey in the year 2 is going to be a little bit more sturdier than what he was last year. But, again, you can only block for your quarterback for so long before your quarterback's got to make the read. He's got to make that decision. So we're going to save the quarterbacks for the last part. I do want to go into the tight ends that you had mentioned. Dulcich, obviously hamstring issues have kind of hampered his, start to his young career. He's back, looks good. Lucas Kroll, who I'm kind of high on. I know he had that fumble in game 1, but they went right back to him. He's a big athletic guy, and I think he kind of gives you a little speed that you need. Kind of what's your thoughts? And is Troutman kind of maybe the odd man out, or do you think he maybe keeps on there just for his blocking ability?
I think he's going to be kept on there for the blocking ability because he is pretty solid at that, at least in my opinion. I thought he was pretty solid on the blocking ability. And he was a reliable target in the red zone. When we did get down there, he was definitely someone Russell Wilson was looking for. But, yeah, no, I really just like Lucas Kroll's chemistry with Nix since he's been getting a lot of reps with him. It started out a little shaky. They weren't on the same page, but as time got on or went on, they just kind of started clicking. And one thing with Kroll is after that fumble, the next drive, I mean, he'd forgotten all about it, and he was just on point. Was a key part of that scoring drive. And then, Greg Dulcich, I had a lot of hopes for him, but my only concern is, can he stay healthy? And that's the issue. Can you stay healthy? Because he's proved that he's good, and he's a tough target to cover. He makes contested catches. He's a good route runner. He kind of struggles in blocking, but again, there's other tight ends that can fill that void for you. But yeah, I just need him to stay healthy.
Spots, what he calls them, essentially. I think if you have a healthy Greg Dulcich and a Lucas Kroll, I mean that opens up a ton. And I think with Troutman, he's familiar with the offense, so I think if he's kind of that guy that can help guide the younger guys along, the mentor. Like you were talking earlier with some of the defensive guys, Troutman is a mentor. Do you think we may see 2 tight ends, or do you see maybe one of them, flanking out like Jimmy Graham used to do with the Saints, or kind of what do you think is maybe a strength of theirs that we may see this season?
I really think that you're going to probably see 2 tight ends being utilized a lot because Sean Payton is he runs a very complex and old school offense. And as you saw, he brought back that power I formation, which is a formation not utilized too often. And I can see him using 2 tight ends very often. He did bring a lot of his Saints offense to the Broncos. Perfect example, first game of the season last year, that onside kick on the opening kickoff. Going back to, the Super Bowl against the Colts, So I think he's trying to turn it into the Saints offense, which I am not opposed to because he had so much success with the Saints. Would have loved to have seen him, gotten another Super Bowl with Drew Brees. But, I mean, I can definitely see a 2 tight end style offense, maybe in utilizing one in more of a blocking scheme than receiving.
Basic Sean Payton. He tried to maybe adjust to what the quarterback's strength was, and you can see it frustrating him. He obviously wants the ball out quick. We saw his offense, in New Orleans. It was the slants, it was the dig routes. Drew Brees was very good at getting the ball out quick. He knew what he wanted to do when he snapped the ball, pre-snap reads, and I think now we're going to see the real playbook of Sean Payton this year. And that's not to say that he may still dial it back just a little bit if it does end up being Bo Nix, and rely heavily on, the running backs that we have. So let's jump into the receivers real quick. Tim Patrick, good to see him healthy and making it this deep into camp. Gets a catch the other day, gets a taunting, very weak taunting call. But I mean, where the dude's been the last couple of years, I probably would have did the same thing if I got on the field and got some action.
Yeah, I definitely agree, man. I can't say I blame him for doing it because it's exciting. After 2 years being away, you haven't gotten to play the game that you love so much, and then finally you get a catch, and it's not just a catch; it's a first down catch. now you're on their side of the field. I mean, yeah, I'd probably rub it in your face too, but hey, you know what? Get it out the way now. Get your taunting out the way now, because we're only 2.5 weeks away from the regular season. So all those taunting calls, just knock them out of the way now. Stick to basics. Stay disciplined. Um, I'm excited to have Patrick back, though. I always thought he was a good route runner. I always thought he excelled in the jump ball, and he's fast, and he's a fighter. He's the type of guy where, if the ball's coming up, either he's coming down with it or nobody's coming down with it. Kind of like that Pat Surtain mentality where he said it's mine or no one's. Tim Patrick plays with that same mentality.
Honestly, probably what got him paid was the lack of drops, the sure hands.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was the one a couple years ago that sticks out is that sideline play against the Cowboys, where there was no way that I thought he was going to come down, and he came down with it. And it's just like some of the plays that he's able to make, just ridiculous. Unfortunately, what I'm seeing is he could be on the bubble. They're really excited about some of these young guys. Obviously, Troy Franklin's struggling right now, but Devon Bailey, a Utah guy just like Timmy Pats, he's standing out. He's getting some good chemistry and some good reps with the main guys. I could see a situation where they do keep Bailey over Tim Patrick. And plus, you think about if you cut or trade Tim Patrick, that saves you $7 million, which obviously right now they're cash strapped a little bit. Basically, the first year of the Russell contract kind of, hamstringing him, basically. What are your thoughts? And do you think just based on him being Tim Patrick and what he's done, he could still make the roster? Or do you think Sean Payton has no mindset for that? He's really digging into these young guys?
When it comes to the receiving group, I think honestly that's going to be Sean Payton's toughest decision to make, because you have all that talent and experience plus these younger guys. With Tim Patrick, if he's on the bubble, I don't think it's a talent issue. I don't think it's a money issue. I think it would be like, again, you haven't been in the game for 2 years, and what's to say, yeah, you're fine now, but what's to say you get on that field in the regular season and now I've lost you again? So it may just be based off of like a health wise. Are they looking at it? How healthy is he? Is he taking longer to recover after these games? Because again, your future, these younger guys are your future, essentially. These are the guys that are going to carry on the team when you're injured. So if he gets injured again, how long is it going to take him to come back? These aren't just like little simple ankle sprains. These are an Achilles tear and then an ACL tear. These are hard injuries to come back from. So how 100% sure are they that he is ready to go? And he does look good. He does look like himself. And I was at that Cowboys game where he made the sideline catch, and I remember the touchdown from Teddy Bridgewater to him, and he hit Diggs on a double move, got that separation, and that, man, he hit the star on the star. Man, we were going nuts up there. Again, if he is on the bubble, I think it's going to be more because of health reasons, not so much talent or his inability to want to mentor these younger guys. You have Devon Villay, again, he's basically Tim Patrick Jr. A lot of concerns with Devon Villay when he came in was at Utah. If you watch his highlights at Utah, he had a hard time kind of finishing the catch. He was that type of guy. He would get the ball and his eyes would already be on field before he even got to haul it in. But there's no signs of that at all. So I think he makes the roster. I think he's going to start over Troy Franklin. But yeah, this is going to be a very tough position group to review because of all the talent and experience you have there.
Our receiver room starts with him. And I think he's a good receiver to have a good rapport with a young quarterback. And he gets to go up against Pat Surtain every week during practice, so it's just making him that much better. I'd like to see them use Marvin Mims a little bit better than they did last year. I know you're kind of limited on what you can do with that, but I think he brings a different dynamic to the offense that I think we need those explosives. I know you're not looking. Sean Payton's not trying to razzle and dazzle up 80-yard touchdowns every time. But I think with Marvin Mims, he's just so dynamic and whatnot. What are your thoughts on year two for Marvin?
So Marvin, I completely agree. I don't think he was utilized properly last season, which is a shame. I always thought like he was going to be like the deep threat, especially after that Washington game, and he had that 62-yard touchdown
Mm.
catch. But it kind of showed Wilson just didn't have the arm strength to meet him. And if you watch that touchdown, Mims had to actually slow down to catch that ball just a tad bit. And had that end zone been another 5 to 10 yards, the defender would have stopped him right there. And, who knows what would have happened. So I really think now with the quarterback talent that he has, and then Marvin Mims' strengths, which is he's a speedy guy, he's a good route runner. Obviously, he should be utilized as a deep threat. I think we're going to have a pretty good year. I think he's going to be a breakout player this year. I know last year he had a lot of mental errors, which were the fumbles, like one being, against the Jets where he tried to field a punt, two Jets players were around him, and you're
Yeah.
like, why didn't you call fair catch? And then the Patriots game where he fumbled the kickoff, picked it up, fumbled again. So those are rookie mistakes. I think those are behind him now. I think he looks good in training camp. He's definitely been battling out. He had at least 2 or 3 50-yard touchdown receptions from each QB in training camp so far. So I think you're going to see a lot out of him, and I'm really excited to see him on the roster and being utilized to his strengths. Because last year I was disappointed I didn't get to see that as much.
Not sure why he wasn't used a little more, but I think we may actually find a spot for this guy. I think between him and Mims possibly being kick returners, Virgil has a speed to him, a little burst that I think may help him. But then you think about, well, that's too many receivers to keep on your roster. You got to, are you going to do that, or are you going to keep something else? But I think if they are taking that into consideration, I think Virgil is a guy to look for special teams.
I would agree. I like his speed. I like that he has really good vision. He sees the field in its entirety. He waits for, and if you watch him in OTAs when he fields a punt, he waits for those lanes to open up before he explodes through the lane. So I think he'd be pretty good to use on special teams, those kickoff returns. And Marvin Mims, you have a dual threat back there with Marvin Mims and Jalen Virgil. And again, he was another one. He wasn't utilized properly. I remember it was the last time we played the Panthers, and he had that touchdown catch from Russell Wilson, and then he was never targeted the rest of the game. And it's like, why? I mean, this guy's obviously getting open. Why aren't you hitting him? So I think he's gonna do better on special teams. But I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see him out there for running a route or two
For some of these guys. So let's touch on the offensive line real quick. Not a very deep position, I don't think, but I am excited about what we have. There's obviously a battle for center. I thought it was going to be Forsyth. Obviously, Wattenberg's been getting some run. Do you think that that's actually a battle, or do you think it's going to end up being Forsyth with his experience with Bo Nix?
I think that's still going to be a battle. At first, I kind of wrote Wattenberg off. He was kind of like on and off last season, struggled a little bit here and there, but he's kind of came roaring back, and he's doing pretty good. And even in the game against the Colts, he did pretty well at the center spot. He didn't really allow too much pressure up the middle. And I honestly thought, again, with Forsyth being the teammate of Bo Nix at Oregon, I was like, great, these two have chemistry. They're going to be fine. But Wattenberg's really making his case to take that number one center spot. I would be happy with either or. I think both of them are doing fine, but I really think Wattenberg is just going to be the guy that's going to get the start here.
A few weeks ago, super excited for him. He's just downright nasty. I've seen a couple of the highlights of him just completely mauling the guy and then just continuously running down the field, beating the guy. I think with him and Ben Powers, this is going to be a very important year for those two guys. If we want to get the offense where I think Sean Payton wants to get it, what's your thoughts on the interior?
I think that was probably like the highlight of the offseason right there, is that big extension with Quinn. Sean Payton likes to, and he already understands, like, an offense excels when that line it has strength to it, and they can get that push, that power, you know? So with the running backs that we have, and then you have a versatile quarterback who can scramble and throw, getting that interior push is always been key to his offenses. He did it in New Orleans. He's doing it here. So I really think the line is going to be probably like much better than last year. Not that they were horrible last year, but they, again, like you said earlier, they did get beat, and although the sacks that they allowed 45 sacks, 16 of those were on Russell Wilson. But I think, you're going to see a drop in sacks. You're going to see a drop in pressures. We have a strong offensive line. We have a strong interior. Garrett Bowles, he's a great, outside lineman. I'm really excited for this line. I really think we set Bo Nix or Jarrett Stidham, whoever's going to take over. I really think we're setting them up for success.
Wasn't necessarily on Russ last year was the penalties, the pre-snaps. But it was interesting because I was listening to a couple guys today, and they were talking about, the cadence matters. And Russ didn't play in the preseason, didn't work with the guys in the preseason. So cadence, obviously, hard counts do matter. So I think with either of the quarterbacks, right, I think that's gonna help. There was a false start penalty during the games this last weekend, and it actually got McGlinchey a little fired up. I think it was Stidham who was the quarterback, and he told him, "Hey, figure it out. We're not here to play around with it." So he literally got in Stidham's face about "Hey, that's not what we're doing. Stick to the cadence." So that's a little bit of leadership, right? And I know those guys. It's frustrating for those guys, especially when you hear, they hear it. They heard it all last season. The penalties, the sacks, just the lack of execution on some of their part. So that's a group that I really, really am looking to highlight going into this season. I think that they were ranked in the top 10. I think they were right behind Kansas City at 4 or 5. Bro, you might be able to, I don't remember where Kansas City was, but we weren't too far behind Kansas City as far as the rankings go on that. So let's last position that we haven't talked about. And it's kind of an interesting one just based on Sean Payton's comments a couple weeks ago that he's like, I'll take 3 quarterbacks on the roster. And I don't like that move at all. That scares me a little bit. But I think it's just a bluff. I don't think he's actually going to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster. I personally think Stidham's the odd man out if it does come down to him or Zach Wilson as the second quarterback. I know Stidham has the experience in the offense. He's the veteran. Zach Wilson's arm talent is not something to just kind of wave off. The mental stuff can be worked. We can hope that Sean Payton can work that out. It's the physical abilities and what he can bring to the table.
Yeah, definitely. My issue with Jarrett Stidham is not that he's a bad player. I don't think he's a bad quarterback at all. I think he's a great backup, or not great. I think he's a good backup, but he plays too conservative. He's very conservative. He won't take those shots down the field. If it's a tight coverage, it's one-on-one, no safety help over the top. He doesn't take those shots down the field as often as I would like him to. And he goes for those safer, like the flats or a wheel route, something like that, and kind of hopes that his receiver can turn it into a big game. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I always have the opinion where if you play conservative, at that point you're playing not to lose. Whereas you play aggressive, you're playing to win. Perfect example, that Chiefs and Ravens game, and Harbaugh gets out there and says, "Lamar, you want to go for it?" It was, what was it, 4th and 1? And they were up by 3. And he's like, "Lamar, you want to go for it?" And he said, "Yep." And they ended up getting the first down. That's playing to win. And that's the mentality that I was talking about. That losing mentality, that playing not to lose mentality is gone. I think right now you want to embrace that, we're playing to win. So I think, I agree with you. I think Stidham is the odd man out here. I wrote Zach Wilson off. When he got in, and everyone was saying he looks erratic, uncomfortable in the pocket, putting up wild throws. But as time went on, and I would say this is the Sean Payton effect, he's really looked comfortable. He looks more comfortable in that offense. He's comfortable with his linemen. He's got a good snap count. Everyone's on the same page with the snap count. The receivers are on the same page with him. His arm strength was never in question. It was more so his accuracy. But he's really come a long way. And I think if it does come down to, I don't think Sean Payton's going to keep 3 either. And I read a good story today. Someone suggested maybe sending him to the Vikings with J.J. McCarthy out with that meniscus tear. So I mean, it's a
Yeah.
possibility.
And if
What
you
was
can
that?
get a draft pick out of it, if you get a 7th round or 6th round pick, I mean, we've seen what Sean Payton can do with the 6th and 7th round picks in New Orleans. Not necessarily saying he can do it in Denver,
Mm-hmm.
but don't just I mean, that's a cap relief if you can trade
Mm-hmm.
him. Um, and I still think he does deserve to be a backup somewhere. Um, I would be really, as a fan, I would be really disappointed if he comes out and says that Jared Stidham would be the week 1 starter. Um, and I know that they don't rush Bo Nix if they don't think he's ready, but at the same time, it's kind of like, um, I just don't trust him, Jared Stidham, to be the quarterback leading this team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would trust Stidham more as a backup. I kind of view him as a Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think I love Stidham's leadership and mentorship on and off the field. I like that he got his receivers and his linemen and his running backs together, and they went out to Texas and they all let's all get reps with each other so we can get on the same page. And I love that about him. I think he's a great mentor. I think he's someone to look up to. And you can tell, even though he may not be starter material, the team doesn't look at him like a backup player. It's someone that they respect. But again, at the end of the day, he's just too conservative for me. And Sean Payton is a very aggressive play caller, and you could see his frustration last year. He wanted to make a lot of play calls that he just could not do because he didn't have that type of relationship with Russell Wilson or whatever you want to call it. And so I think now he's trying to move forward. He wants that aggressiveness. He wants that explosiveness from every position. So I think if it came down to it, I think Stidham would be the guy that parts ways with Denver. Like you said, get a draft pick for him and move forward with this young team.
In the training camp, and roster cuts are going to be starting really quick. If you had to put your finger on something and say this is a move I think the Broncos are going to make that may surprise people, what may that move be?
A move that would surprise everyone. To be honest with you, man, I haven't really given too much thought about that. I've kind of been paying attention to see when he's gonna name the starting quarterback in the other position battles. Um, I think honestly, the move that would surprise me though is he does end up keeping all three of them. That would really surprise me.
Does
Mm-hmm.
he's always thinking ahead. He's not always going to let them know what he's thinking. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at that either. I think a move that may surprise me a little bit is if they end up keeping Tim Patrick. I think honestly, it hurts, it sucks, but at the same time, he hasn't done anything for us the last couple of seasons, and I know that he's going to land on his feet. Someone's going to pick him up. Someone's going to give him a chance, especially if he can show that he's still healthy. They're gonna snatch him up. Hopefully, it's not Kansas City or the Chargers. But I think he ends somewhere good. Bro, do you have anything before we transition over to a little AFC West talk?
Yeah, a couple points that I want to kind of go over. Kind of let the Denver fans kind of hash it out with the Denver. And then I come in with kind of the outside perspective. Now, I know I'm a Chiefs fan, and I don't like Denver, but I feel like I do a pretty good job of being reasonable. I'm not one of those ridiculous fans. So first, I want to say, as a Chiefs fan, I'm really glad that Justin Simmons is gone. Because if there's one dude who has success against Patrick Mahomes, it's been Justin Simmons. It's kind of the thing you can count on. So glad he's gone. But I also want to say that I think he does keep all three quarterbacks for the simple reasoning of the new rule that was implemented last year, where you can keep two on the active roster, and then you have that third emergency quarterback due to what happened to the Niners in the playoffs. So the third won't count towards the active roster, but he'll still be there able to play if needed. And I think that works to his benefit here to where he can keep all three, but only have two count towards the active roster. I think that's huge. It keeps him from having to make a decision or a cut that he doesn't want. But other than that, I just wanted to say I know they're only projected 3 wins, and on the grand scheme of things, I think that's only because there's a lot of question marks. Because there is a lot of talent on here, but the question marks that are on that roster are kind of big positions. Quarterback, when you don't really know what you're getting from the quarterback position, it just makes things uh, kind of hard to predict. And then a little bit of secondary, and then kind of, I don't want to say unproven pass rushers, uh, but not necessarily, the Von Miller type or Bradley Chubb that you're just calling an elite pass rusher. So uh, I don't want to say 3 wins is reasonable, but I can understand it. Uh, but I think you guys are right when it's more of an 8 to 10 win team, because they do have a lot of good young talent. Uh, Pair that with the quality coaching that they have, there's no reason that this team can't be at the very least competitive in most games. And then with Sean Payton on the sidelines, he'll be able to coach some of those close games into victories. So I think there's a lot of reason to be excited in Denver, uh, especially if Bo Nix comes and balls out. I liked him coming out of college. The fact he ended up in Denver kind of sucks, but uh, it is what it is. But I think there is reason for optimism in Denver. There is a lot of quality talent, and it is kind of disrespectful to say that they're only going to get 3 wins. I don't think they're going to be even close to the race for the first pick, even as a Chiefs fan. That's just ridiculous.
I think we're all in agreement. It's still the Chiefs until someone proves otherwise. Even last year with it being a down year, whatever, right? They still got a Super Bowl out of a down year. Awesome. They get more firepower. They got a lot of guys back. Chris Jones on the defense, Nick Bolton. You lose L'Jarius Sneed, obviously, but you're able – I know that last night, bro, you were talking about that maybe being a concern is the secondary, the corners at least. But as long as 15 and 87 are on the offense and you have Big Red on the sideline, unfortunately for us Bronco fans, we're going to probably have to continue to see what we're chasing, right? So obviously the Chiefs are first. I guess, do we think it's between the Chargers and Broncos for second, or do we think the Raiders realistically maybe in fight for second? I'm in the camp of I don't think Raiders are anywhere close to the Chargers. I do like the Chargers just based on coaching hire. I guess you got to worry about if Herbert's going to stay healthy with the Liz Frank. So kind of what's your guys' take on who's this number 2?
Not the Raiders. I would put if I was a betting man, I still think Denver finishes second. I talked about the unknown in Denver, but I still think there's a lot more unknown with the Chargers. Their running backs, yes, they came from Baltimore, but they're still a little unknown with Dobbins' health. Is Edwards really the RB1 explosive guy that you're going to want to lean on? And then their receiving core. I mean, that's just one giant question mark at this point. They do have some talent, but those are skill positions that you just don't know what you're getting. So until I see what that team does and how Harbaugh runs it, I trust Denver a little bit more with what they have to finish second than I do the Chargers.
Yeah, I could see Denver finishing second. I honestly see Oakland and Denver going second, and the reason being is the Chargers actually lost quite a bit of time. They lost Keenan Allen, they lost Austin Eckler. Justin Herbert has a hard time staying healthy. So I mean, if I had to come down between the two of them, as much as I hate to say it, I think that battle for second place goes between Denver and why do I want to call them Oakland all the time? I'm still getting used to calling the Commanders, and not the Redskins. But yeah, I still think Vegas and Denver are going to battle for second, and that's going to be a good series to watch between the two of them.
Obviously, should have probably won that game last year against him at home, but we didn't, and no excuses, right? They do have Max Crosby. Their defense is still a little iffy. Obviously, the quarterback spot, iffy. Devontae Adams is still Devontae Adams. I like the running back, White. And then they have Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer as tight ends. But again, it comes down to quarterback. So yeah, I mean, if Bo is the guy. I'm not saying he's going to have a CJ Stroud-like season, but if he can have like 75 to 80% of what CJ Stroud was able to do last year, awesome. I think, that's why I said, I still think it's a 7 to 8 win, but I think it could also be a ceiling of 10 wins for the Broncos. And I think that would be good enough to put them in second place. It's wild. Herbert not being able to stay healthy, but when the dude's healthy, man, but now who's he going to throw to, right? And then their defense, Derwin James, they got some pieces on defense, but obviously I know how my brother feels about Joey Bosa and that. But, so I think it's going to be a wild ride in the AFC West. I mean, outside of the Chiefs. But then again, we didn't expect the Chiefs to come out and play like they did last year. Is this we say it on our podcast quite a few times about, is this finally the year that maybe Travis Kelce does lose a step? And if it is there a guy that Pat can rely on? I'm still in the boat saying, no, this isn't going to be the year. I don't think it's going to be the year. But I think that's just because of what they've been able to do to us the last, 8 years. So any final remarks, Matt? We really appreciate you coming on here and talking football with us, man. This is kind of why we started this and why we do this, is to get people on here, get some insight, just let you basically talk about your passion and being a Broncos fan. Love what you're doing on Instagram and your write-ups and your updates. It's really awesome. So we'll give you a couple minutes here to kind of, any last comments or remarks you want to make.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you guys having me on here. It really is a humble, it's a good experience to have, man. I honestly didn't think I started this page. I started it last season. Didn't think it was really going to turn into what it is now. And I do really appreciate you guys having me on here. I'm really looking forward to the season. I think it's a completely new team this year. I think we're going to give the Chiefs a run for their money. I still think the Chiefs are going to take that number one spot, but I think we're going to split that series. I think everyone's going to be surprised. And again, I'm keeping the receipts on the, 3-14. One of my followers told me that the only way the Broncos are going to make the playoffs is if the other 31 quarterbacks got injured. And that was the only way there. So I'm keeping that receipt as well. So I'll be ready for anyone that's doubting us, anyone that's doubting the Broncos. I'm keeping the receipts. And that's all I got to say on that.
Updates throughout the season, right? So hopefully we're coming on here and we're talking about a good division battle going with the Chiefs. So again, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, now YouTube. We'll get this uploaded to our podcast tonight. We'll work on the video portion of it. That takes a little bit more time. So look for the video in the next couple of days. And make sure to go find Matt on Instagram. All right, Matt, give him your username one more time.
Username is Orange Crush News 365.
Follow him and look forward to having him on throughout the season. Next week, we dive into some college football talk. We'll have another special guest. So again, thank you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.